To work the buttonholes for the back, or the button loops for the back, we're going to begin by neatening up the edge of the raw edge, basically, of our two back panels. I've done it up here on one panel, and now I'll show you how to do it down here on the next panel. I've got my crochet hook and my yarn, again same yarn that I used for the rest of the project, and my crochet hook, which is the same size as the knitting needle that I used to knit this project. You can of course use a different yarn and a different crochet hook. How the rate that you pick up along the edge here might be different than what I'm using, and that's okay. I'll talk to you about that. I'm going to begin working from the right to the left. This of course could be worked, if you're left-handed, from the left to the right. That's totally up to you, but you want to have the right side of your work facing, and you're going to use your crochet hook and your working yarn, and we're going to start as close to the edge where we've joined our work as possible. And what you want to do is pick a column to work in. Again, I'm going to dissuade you from working on the very edge of your project. I like to work on the first, I'm going to call this the first kind of proper row or column in. And you can see I'm kind of folding it between my fingers like this. Makes it a bit easier to work in, because we're going to do that stitch where we're going to put your crochet hook under two legs of a knit stitch like this. And so I want to work in a row that's relatively neat, as close to the edge as possible, but I don't want to bother with these edge stitches that are not consistent. So I'm going to work right along the edge here, and I'm going to put my crochet hook under the two bars of a single stitch in a nice column as close to my join edge as I can get, and I'll take my working yarn and fold it over my crochet hook and pull it through those two legs, just like that. So I have a tail, I have the yarn attached to my ball, and I have a loop over my crochet hook, and I'm going to take the yarn that's attached to the ball, and I'm going to make one chain into the loop that's on my crochet hook. So my crochet hook goes under the yarn, and I'll pull it through the loop that's on my hook, and that chain just anchors me to the edge of my work. And now I'm going to take my crochet hook, and I'm going to insert it under the two legs of the stitch above the one that I just entered. So I'm putting my crochet hook under the two legs of the next stitch above. I've got a loop on my crochet hook, the two legs of the stitch, and now with my crochet hook I'm going to go under the yarn and pull it through so that I have two loops on my hook. And this time we want to create a stitch that's slightly bigger than a chain stitch. So I'm going to talk to you about doing a single crochet, that's the North American term, or a double crochet, that's the UK terminology. I'll just call it the crochet stitch from here on out to keep it from being too confusing. But once you have two loops on your hook, you're going to yarn over one more time. So take your hook and go under the working yarn and pull it through both loops on your hook. And this creates a stitch that is just slightly taller than a chain stitch. Now we're going to do that again. So with the crochet hook, go under the two legs of the stitch on the next stitch up on the column, and again put the yarn around the crochet hook, or take your crochet hook under the yarn and pull through to the front of your work so that you have two loops on your hook, and then again your hook goes under the yarn and you'll pull through both loops on your hook. Now we are working perpendicular, and so this means that if we continue to put one of these crochet stitches in each stitch going up here, we'd end up with a ruffle. So we're going to skip stitches just like you would if you were picking up and knitting in a knitting project. I've now put 3 of these crochet stitches in 3 rows, or 3 stitches in along this row. So I'm now going to skip this 4th stitch, and what that means is that instead of putting my crochet hook under the two legs of the fourth stitch, I'm going to skip over it and put it underneath the two legs of the fifth stitch and yarn over and pull that up, and then again yarn over and pull through both loops on my hook. I'm going to do that 3 times. So I've put, this is the fifth stitch, this is the sixth stitch, this is the seventh stitch, and now I'm going to skip the 8th stitch. So I'm putting in 3 crochet stitches for every 4 rows, and that means I should have 6 stitches here. Here's 1, that's the first chain, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so I'm going to skip this next one and do 3 more. So again, by skipping it just means don't work in it. And I find this ratio of 3 crochet stitches, or in knitting 3 picked up stitches for every 4 rows, works quite nicely. So I'm making a little single or double crochet border right along the edge of my work, and I'm going to keep going in this direction, putting in 3 stitches for every 4 rows. And the only thing that you need to remember is that the difference between doing a chain and doing this stitch is that once you go under the 2 legs of the stitch and pull your loop back, when you have 2 loops on your crochet hook, put your yarn under your working yarn, put your crochet hook under your working yarn and draw through both loops. And this creates a slightly taller stitch. 1, 2, 3, and I find it easier to work if I kind of fold that row that I'm working on under my left thumb and middle finger and let that, ugly part of the selvage edge just hang down away from me. See how I've got it pinched between my fingers here? And that just makes it a little bit easier to go underneath those 2 legs. So this is going to neaten up our selvage edge, and we'll work the button loops into it. Let's give that a try. When you get to the end of the edge that you're working on, try to make sure that you've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3. I'm skipping one here, but you want to work right to the very edge if you can. So I'm going to put my last single crochet in there, and I might be able to squeeze just one more in here like that, just so that I cover up the edge right underneath my join. And then grab your scissors, and you can cut your yarn or leave this attached for the buttonholes. So once you've got both sides completed here, then you can decide which side you want to have your buttonholes on. This might be more important on a cardigan than it would be on a on the back of a pillow. But here you can have a good look at your edge and decide where you want to put it, or maybe if you feel like it's too ripply or too tight, you could always pull it back and work at a different ratio than you did the first time. All right, so just make sure you put your last stitch in as close to your joining edge as you can. The next step is figuring out where I'm going to place my buttons. I happen to have 12 of these little orange buttons, and I thought they might work quite nicely, but I need to know how far apart to place them. So the first thing I did was count my stitches and put in a little marker every 10 stitches. And to count your stitches, you're just counting these little V's along the edge. You can see here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I counted from left to right, and I put a marker in every 10 stitches. So I've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then down here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count that one 6, 96 stitches in my project. So I'm going to take my number, 96, and then figure out what might be an even kind of divisible number. So 96, if I divide it by 2, that's equal to 2 times 48. And I need to break that down more because I'm going to have more than 2 buttons and less than 48. So that's equal to 2 times 48 is equal to 4 times 12. Now I have 12 buttons, but that might be too many for this project. I can break it down a little bit more. 2 times 4 times 3 times 4, and I can work with different combinations of these numbers. So for example, I could take 4 times 4 is 16 times 6, so I could have 16 buttons 6 stitches apart, or 6 buttons 16 stitches apart. See how that works? Or I could go back to my original 12 here and do 12 times 8. So that means I could have 8 buttons 12 stitches apart, or 12 buttons 8 stitches apart. I'm going to try this one and see what that looks like by marking it out on my project. So if I were to put these markers 12 stitches apart instead of 8 stitches apart, or instead of 10 stitches apart, I'm going to just see where my markers would end up. And one of the things I'm going to do before I plan that out is break the first multiple of 12, the first division of 12 in half. So I'll start 6 stitches from this end and then count 12 stitches along here so that I end up 6 stitches from this end. And that's just to make sure that I have a button on either end that is close to the edge. Now, if you had a really weird number and you were trying to work it out, one of the things you could do is put a stitch marker in here and count in between them, because it's nice to have a button at either end, and that can help you to get a nice even number. So play around with your numbers that way. I'll come back when I've got them all sorted out. So I rearranged my markers so that I have 6 stitches from the edge and then 12 stitches in between each of these markers. And I just laid my buttons out here so I could see what they would look like. And I think that's going to work nicely for me. I like having the idea of my buttons fairly close together so that there's, you know, I want to avoid any kind of gappiness in here or too much pull on it as it comes along. But also, I don't want to sew on 12 buttons. That seems like a lot. So my buttons are smaller. You might have larger buttons. You might have 3 or 4 really big buttons that you want to put along the back. So you would space those out with more space, between your markers. So first step is to kind of figure out where you want those button loops to be, and this is one way of doing that. All right, I've got my buttons planned out and I'm going to begin working on the buttonholes. Because I like to work from right to left and because my yarn is attached to my work here, I'm going to turn my pillow cover around. There we go, and I'll begin working from this side. So I'll remove my stitch marker that's holding it in place here. And I'll put this loop back on my hook and take the yarn to the back. So I have my yarn over my left hand. I have the loop that I finished with over my crochet hook. And I'm going to begin by working a single crochet, American terms, or a double crochet, UK terms, in each of these stitches along here, but planning for the buttonhole as I come up to my marker. So I'll begin by working a single crochet or double crochet into this first stitch here. So you can see that I have a loop on my hook, and right below that is the first stitch from the row below. So I'm going to take my hook and put it into that stitch or just under the flat part of the stitch that's on top. From the side, it kind of feels like you're going into a little hole underneath that top edge of the stitch. I'll take my yarn, put my crochet hook under the yarn and pull a loop forward so that I have 2 loops on my hook. And then I will put my hook under the yarn and pull through both of the loops on my hook. And I've just created an American single crochet or a UK double crochet. Let's do that again. So in the next stitch, I'm going to put my hook under the top edge of the stitch, put my hook under the yarn and pull the yarn forward so that I have 2 loops on my hook, and then my hook will go under the yarn and pull it through both the loops on your hook. You can pull through one at a time if you like. So once you have 2 loops on your hook, you could pull through once and then again. Just don't yarn over in between. I'm going to work my way up to my locking stitch marker here, and I'm going to stop 1 stitch away. I want to make a buttonhole, and I want to make it about the width of my button. So I'm just going to hold my button up here and have a look at how many stitches that goes across. And I see 3, 1, 2, 3 along the edge of my button. So I'm going to try that. What I'm going to do next then is chain 3 to make up for 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to skip 3 stitches on the row below. So 1 stitch before my stitch marker, 1 stitch that my stitch marker is in, and 1 stitch after my stitch marker. So I'm going to work into this next stitch here, skipping over 3, and I'm going to do the same stitches before. I'm going to take my crochet hook and slide it underneath the top edge of that next hole, and then yarn over in the back and pull that through to create 2 loops on my hook, and then yarn over and pull through both loops. Now I'll just take a little break here. I'll pop a locking stitch marker into this loop, and I'm just going to test my hole to see how well my button fits through it. So I'm just popping my button through that hole, and it's snug, which is good, but it fits, you know, I can pop it through and it's not too tight, it's not too loose. These stitches can loosen up over time, so it's better to err on the side of being slightly too tight than to be too loose and have them pop open on you. Okay, I'm going to put this stitch back on my crochet hook, and just remind you that once you've got your locking stitch markers in here, if your buttons are small, you might just stop 1 stitch before your marker and chain 2 and then attach it just after the marker, or you could work right up to your marker, chain 2, and then skip as many stitches below as you've chained and attach it to the next one. And we always anchor it down with a with single crochet or double crochet UK terms in between each of those buttonholes. I'll leave my stitch markers in place until I'm done this row, because if I decide that when I'm done, if I decide that my holes are too large or too small, I can just pull back on the last row that I've done, and I don't have to replace my stitch markers. So again, I'm remembering to leave 3 stitches, so 1 before my marker, 1 after my marker, and I'm going to chain 1, 2, 3, as many chains as I'm skipping stitches down below, and then to rejoin my row again, I'm going into the next stitch after I've skipped 3, pulling my yarn through, and then again yarn over and pulling through both loops on my crochet hook. All right. Now this is the middle row, so there's one more row that we're going to do after this, but let's practice this for a little bit and see what it looks like. So I'm down, I've worked across my buttonhole row. I've left my buttonholes in place, and now I'm getting down to the very last stitch here, and I also would like to change color. So I've cut my yarn, and I'm just going to show you two things. One is that you want to work into the very last stitch. So this is the chain one that we did at the very beginning, and I put my hook through. I'm going to draw through with my orange yarn so that I have 2 loops on my hook, because my very last draw through is drawing through these 2 loops on my hook. So I'll take my blue yarn and fold it over the crochet hook and use it to draw through those 2 loops on my hook. And that puts your new color yarn right at the edge of your work, but it just makes it appear in the right place for the next row. So for the next row, we're going to turn everything around, and we're going to work one more row of single crochet American or double crochet UK across this row. I want my yarn to be in the back, so I'm just going to take it around here behind my crochet hook, and I'm going to deal with these tails that are dangling here afterwards. We use them for good. Oh, now my stitch is wrapped around. So I want to work from the right to the left, and so I've just moved my hook, so it's now I've turned my work so that my hook is on the right, and I'm going to work towards the left. And just like before, I'm going to work into the tops of stitches. The first one is just below the loop that's on my hook, so I'm going to take my hook and put it underneath that first stitch, draw my yarn through so that I have 2 loops on my hook, and then draw through both loops. And I'm going to do that across my work. And now when I get to my stitch markers, I will take them out because I don't need them anymore. And when I get to the chains, so here I don't have like a stable stitch below. I have 3 chains here. And so there's a couple of things you can do. The what would you call it? Probably the top crochet alternative is to try and get your hook underneath the 2 bars of the top stitch so that you can crochet into the top of that chain. It's very hard though, especially for beginner crocheters, to do that. So if you're having difficulty getting your hook just under the 2 legs of that chain stitch, right? It's hard even for me. I managed to do it. So you can pull your loop through, and then you can chain 2. The second one is probably a little bit easier, but again, this is kind of tedious. So if you're having trouble with that, don't worry about it. You can just put your hook into the hole that is the buttonhole. Bring your yarn forward so that you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through your 2 loops. So instead of crocheting into the top of that chain, you're actually crocheting into the buttonhole, and you'll likely find that that's just a lot easier. It will make your buttonhole slightly bigger too because it's pulling on it, but that's okay. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And then you're going to continue to crochet along the tops of the stitches from the row below. So work your way back for one more row across there just to stabilize that buttonhole there and to give it one more bit of closure on this end. We're just making the buttonhole side a little taller. And you don't have to stop here. If you wanted to, you could crochet several rows on top of this one to make it longer. That's just fine. But we'll start with one row and see what you think. Okay?